Yeah, I've gotten several of these. Thank you. Wow, they're getting bigger and more fragrant as I'm here. This is wonderful. Well, I still haven't learned how to pronounce this place yet, where we are today. But David Hawking called it Canoe last night, I think. But anyway, it is great to be here. And I agree with you. Cheryl and I commented at the same thing as we were there about the worship team. What a wonderful job they do here, but at the conference. And part of that may be because we'd already been here and we already have a kindred spirit and an affection for the folks here. But we really enjoyed that very much. We want to thank you all for that. And just for the great hospitalities we've been here. It's been wonderful. I think I mentioned this the other night. This is my second time to be here, Cheryl's fourth time. But the other times we've been here, just came over here to vacation the one time. But this is the first time to be here and be in churches. And when I come to churches, especially here as beautiful as it is, I'll always remember being here. And on Sunday mornings, we'll remember you along. I'll always think about churches and pray for the pastors. Now, the time difference is a little bit different. But I was getting up on Sunday mornings, I know for the next few weeks, I'll remember this place and the dear people here and your pastor and just the wonderful spirit that's here and the truth and the love that we've talked about before. Well, I want to bring a message this morning about 7 signs of the end times, looking at some of these signs of the times. We've talked about a lot of different things in this conference, but I thought it might be good to just look at how things in our world are shaping up. Really, as the Bible has predicted. To get started, though, I want to look at. All right, I've got a little. I got a list here. Let's see. Huh. Oh well. Well, that's all right. If you were able to get this up there, I can read it to you all. I have to have it up there, but I've got a list. It's called 10 ways to know if you're obsessed with Bible prophecy. And it's one of these top 10 lists. And so you can kind of go through this and see how you fit in here. Number 10 is you use the Left Behind books as devotional reading. Number 9, you get goosebumps when you hear a trumpet. Number 8, you believe the term church fathers refers to Hal Lindsey and Tim LaHaye. Number 7, you believe there's an original Greek and Hebrew text with Schofield's notes. Number 6, you can name more signs of the times than you can commandments. Number 5, you refuse a tax refund check because the amount comes to $666. I said you better take a tax refund any way you can get it nowadays. Number 4, barcode scanners make you nervous. Number 3, you talk your church into adapting the 60s pop song "Up, Up and Away" as a Christian hymn. Number 2, you never buy green bananas. In other words, the Lord can come so soon, And the number one way to know if you're obsessed with Bible prophecy is you always leave the top down on your convertible in case the rapture happens. Well, I'm not obsessed with Bible prophecy, but I certainly do enjoy studying it because to me it puts the whole Bible together. I'm a pastor of a church, and we go through books of the Bible, and so we don't just talk about prophecy all the time. We don't want to make that some kind of a hobby horse. But to me, if you love the Bible, you love prophecy. Because 28% of the Bible was prophecy at the time it was written. And so the Bible itself is a book of prophecy. The Bible tells us where the world's headed. It shines the headlights out into the darkness to show us where we're going. And it answers all the questions, or many of them, that people are asking today. And people are asking a lot of questions. The world today, as we've mentioned several times, is filled with a lot of fear and of a lot of anxiety and uncertainty. And people everywhere kind of have this collective sense that the world's getting near closing time. I like to say that apocalypse is in the air. It's just kind of like there's an apocalyptic feeling or a sense that's out there in the world today. 20% of Americans believe the world's going to end in the next couple of decades. We've got, the economy, the problems, natural disasters, terrorism, nuclear weapons in the wrong hands. Those of you who were there yesterday probably heard me talk about, these pandemic plagues. I saw a deal a while back called it Apocalypse Now, when the swine flu was out there going along. But people are asking questions like never before. And when I talk to people on some of the TV and radio interviews I'm privileged to do, people want to know, where's America in prophecy? They want to know if President Obama is the Antichrist. People ask those kind of questions, which, by the way, 24% of Republicans in a recent poll said they thought he might be the Antichrist. Was the world going to end in 2012? How much longer can the tensions in this world be held in check without the lid blowing off? So people have all kinds of questions about the future, and the only place to find these answers is in the Bible. And the Bible tells us that there will be signs that we will see that portend the coming of the Lord. Back in Matthew 16 and verse 1, it says, "The Pharisees and the Sadducees came up, and testing Jesus, they asked him to show them a sign from heaven. But he replied to them, 'When it's evening, you say it will be fair weather, for the sky is red. And in the morning there will be a storm today, for the sky is red. And in the morning there will be a storm today, for the sky is red and threatening. Do you not know how to discern the appearance of the sky, but you cannot discern the signs of the times?'" So what happened at that time period is Jesus was on the earth, and Jesus was here doing the things that the Bible says the coming Messiah would do. And so Jesus was healing people. He was traveling about doing the things that the Bible said the Messiah would do at his first coming. And Jesus says, "You all are great amateur meteorologists. You know how to look out and discern the signs of the times, or the sky and the heavens and the weather. But he says the problem is you can't see the signs of the times." In other words, the signs were pointing them to the fact that Jesus was the Messiah. And I think the same way that there were signs of the first coming of Jesus that tell us that Jesus is the Messiah, there will be signs of the second coming of Jesus as well that will tell us that he's coming again. You remember 2 days before Jesus died on the cross, in Matthew's Gospel, in Matthew, a little bit further in Matthew, in chapter 24 and verse 3, the disciples asked Jesus, they said, "When will these things be? What will be the sign of your coming in the end of the age?" And Jesus didn't say, "Well, don't worry about it. You don't worry about any signs or anything that's going to happen. I'm going to come back someday, and it's just going to be a big surprise. Don't worry about it." No, what did Jesus do? In Matthew 24, verses 4 to 31, he lays out a whole list of all these signs that will portend his second coming back to the earth. And one other passage I might mention is in Hebrews chapter 10. There's a verse that probably a lot of us are familiar with in Hebrews 10, where the writer there says, "Don't forsake the assembling of yourselves together, as the manner of some is, but encourage one another." And then he says, "And do it all the more as you see the day drawing near." So he's saying, look, we need to be gathering together and fellowshipping and being with one another and encouraging one another, but do it even more as you see the day drawing near. Well, let me ask you the question, if we can't see the day drawing near, then how are we going to know when to do that? It presupposes, that statement does, that we're going to be able to in some way see that day drawing near, so that we know how much more we need the fellowship with one another. And so I think the Bible tells us there are many signs that will indicate that the coming of the Lord is near. And according to the Bible, there are a series of what I call kind of carefully timed events that serve like signposts on the road to Armageddon. They're events that cast their shadows before them before they get here. We live in the time today of, we might call, the preparation of fulfillment of prophecy. Did we able to get those slides? Maybe we can get that one up there. The one that's got just the kind of a timeline and all. Can you do it from back there? Okay, there it is. Great. Now you notice, every Bible prophecy teacher has to have a chart, right? Notice over on the left-hand side where it says the current church age, or the preparation for fulfillment. That's where we are today. And then see, one of these days the rapture is going to happen. And then after the rapture, there's probably going to be a further time of preparation. Because see, a lot of people will ask, well, how's this or that going to take place? If the rapture were to occur today, how could the tribulation start? Because this thing or that thing's not in place. Remember, the rapture could happen at any time. And the rapture, though, doesn't start the 7-year tribulation. Hopefully we all know that. The event that starts the 7-year tribulation is a covenant between the Antichrist and Israel. That's what actually starts the tribulation. So when the rapture happens, it could happen today, and the tribulation might not start for another week or month or even another year or 2 years. We don't know. But the tribulation will start when Antichrist makes that treaty. So at some point the rapture is going to happen. There will be some time of further preparation. Then that treaty will be signed and the tribulation period will start. But we live still on that side of the rapture. We live in the time of the preparation for the fulfillment. What we see today primarily is not the fulfillment of prophecy, although there are a few prophecies being fulfilled. Primarily what we see is the stage being set for these prophecies to be fulfilled. Because when you think about it, the events of the end times can't occur in a vacuum. There has to be a setup. And we live in the time of the preparation. So what I want to do is look at 7 of the key signposts on the road to Armageddon that, according to the Bible, strikingly foreshadow what's going to take place in the future. And really, we see events today, we could say, on fast forward. I mean, it's like things are accelerating before our eyes. Now, the first of these signposts I want to mention is the one that we all know about, and that is the regathering of the nation of Israel. I call this the super sign of the end times, because all the other events of the end times are dependent in one way or another upon Israel being a nation. Because think about it, when the event that starts the tribulation period is the signing of a covenant between Antichrist and Israel. We can't sign a covenant with Israel if they don't exist as a nation, so they have to exist. One of the other events we're going to look at a little bit later is Israel's going to be invaded in the end times by a group of nations in Ezekiel 38. They're going to come down into the land of Israel when they've been regathered to their land. Well, again, they can't invade Israel in the land if Israel isn't in the land. So this is the super sign, and it has to occur. And in 1948, Israel became a nation. And at that time, about 6% of the Jews in the world lived in the nation of Israel. Now it's almost 40%. And last year, for the first time since 135 AD, there are now more Jews in Israel than any other place on earth. There are more Jews in Israel now than there are in the United States. And according to Ezekiel 37, and really a host of other Old Testament prophecies, in fact, some have said the most prophesied event in the Old Testament is the regathering of the Jews to their land. But Ezekiel 37, you remember pictures, the bones, the dried bones coming together, and then the skin comes on and the flesh, and then God breathes into them. It's a picture of Israel being regathered. And initially they're regathered physically to the land, and then ultimately they're going to be regathered spiritually to the Lord. But they're being regathered to their land. And what other generations dreamed of seeing, we now are able to see. Did you know that there's never been a group of people that have been exiled from their land that remained a distinct people? The Jewish people have been exiled from their land, though not once, but multiple times. And they remained a distinct people. The last time the Jews were put out of their land in 70 AD by the Romans, they ended up in 70 different countries of the world. And they were there for 20 centuries. And yet God brought them back as a distinct people to their land. And in the late 1800s, their language, ancient Hebrew, that had died was revived. I mean, it's a miracle. In fact, the modern nation of Israel is often called the miracle on the Mediterranean. Last year, for the first time, as I said, there's more Jews now in Israel than any other place. Years ago, when I was in seminary, Dr. Pentecost, J. Dwight Pentecost, he's got a great book called Things to Come. In fact, Dr. Pentecost still teaches there. He's 96 years old. Teaches 2 classes a week now. But he said back in the 40s, late 40s, he was driving home one night from a camp he'd been speaking at in Pennsylvania. And as he was driving home that night, he said, a lot of you remember the old radio, the old AM, trying to get stations at night, kind of crackling. And he says he was listening to this station and a news bulletin came on. And they came on and interrupted to say that earlier that day, May the 14th of 1948, that David Ben-Gurion had announced the establishment of the modern state of Israel. And that 11 minutes later, Harry Truman had recognized the establishment of the state of Israel. And he said he had to pull off the road because he began to weep, because what people had said for hundreds of years was going to take place, he was hearing with his own ears at that time. I have a great book. I love it. It's one of my favorite ones by J.C. Ryle called Are You Ready for the End of Time? And J.C. Ryle wrote in 1867 when he wrote this book. And he said, I don't know how it's going to happen. It seems impossible. But he says, the Bible says the Jews have to be regathered to their land. And I believe it has to happen someday. And every time I read that, I just get a chill down my spine because I think if J.C. Ryle could have seen what we're seeing in our